My name is Trevor Mitchell, 32, and I built my dream lakeside home after coding my way to success despite my family never believing in me. For years, they called me the failure, the disappointment. The one who would never amount to anything. So when my sister Megan and her husband Harrison suddenly wanted to use my house for their fancy party with wealthy clients, I should have seen the red flags. They needed my success to save their failing business while still treating me like garbage. Before I tell you how I turned the tables on my family, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, and hit that like and subscribe button to support my channel. Growing up in the Mitchell household meant one thing above all else. Appearances matter. My parents, Gerald and Diana Mitchell, were obsessed with status, connections, and what the neighbors thought. From the country club memberships they could barely afford to the luxury cars they leased to maintain the illusion of wealth, everything in our lives was curated for show. I was the odd one out from the beginning, while my sister Megan was the social butterfly who understood the game. I was the quiet kid who preferred taking apart computers to attending garden parties. My parents saw her social grace as their legacy and my technical interests as a disappointment. Trevor, why are you wasting time playing those video games? My father would ask, not understanding the difference between gaming and the programming I was teaching myself. You should be networking like your sister. Connections are what matter in this world. Every time Megan brought home a new friend from a prominent family, my parents beamed with pride. When I aced my advanced computer science classes, they nodded absently and changed the subject. College decisions really highlighted the divide. Megan went to an Ivy League school to study business and communications, a perfect fit for the Mitchell family image. I chose a state university with an excellent computer science program against my parents' wishes. That school is beneath our family standard, my mother said with a grimace when I announced my choice. People will think we couldn't afford better. My college years were spent coding late into the night, working on projects that excited me, and building skills that would eventually pay off. Meanwhile, Megan met Harrison Wellington, a finance major from a good family, who immediately charmed my parents. "Why can't you be more like Harrison?" became a constant refrain during family gatherings. "He understands how the world works." After graduation, I jumped into the tech startup world while Megan and Harrison had an extravagant wedding that drained my parents' savings. They considered it an investment in family connections. My first 3 startups failed. Each failure was met with knowing looks from my family, particularly Harrison, who had landed a job at a prestigious financial firm through his father's connections. "The tech bubble will burst," Harrison would say smugly at family dinners. "You should consider something more stable before it's too late." What they didn't see were the lessons I learned from each failure, the skills I was building, and the network of genuine supporters I was creating in the tech community. I lived frugally in a tiny apartment, reinvesting every dollar I could into my next venture. Then came the breakthrough. I developed a specialized software solution for healthcare data management that hit the market at exactly the right time. Within 18 months, my company was acquired by a major tech firm for a sum that changed my life overnight. The first thing I did was buy my dream house, a beautiful modern home on Lake Washington with floor-to-ceiling windows, a private dock, and stunning architecture. It was everything I'd worked for. Peaceful, beautiful, and mine. You might think this success would finally earn my family's respect. Instead, it just changed their approach. Now I wasn't a failure, I was lucky. Some people just stumble into success, my father said when he first visited my new home. His eyes surveyed the property with a mixture of envy and disbelief. "You certainly fell into the right trend at the right time," Harrison added, his handshake just a bit too firm, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. Megan walked through my house taking photos for her Instagram, never once congratulating me directly. Later I saw her posts. "Enjoying family wealth at the lake #blessed. As if my house were a family asset rather than something I'd earned. Still, I held on to hope that they might eventually recognize what I'd built. I invited them to holiday gatherings, listened to their stories, and tried to be the bigger person. After all, they were family, and some part of me still craved their approval. The house became my sanctuary, a place where I could work remotely, host friends who actually supported me, and find peace away from the family dynamics that had shaped my childhood. I filled it with books, technology one loved, and furniture that brought me comfort rather than serving to impress others. Every morning, I'd have coffee on my deck overlooking the water, sometimes catching the sunrise, and remind myself that I had created this life on my own terms. Those moments of peace were worth more than any recognition my family might give. Little did I know that my sanctuary was about to become the battleground for the most dramatic family showdown yet. My success had created something my status-obsessed family desperately wanted: access to an impressive space they could use for their own purposes. And they were about to make their move. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon in April when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, which should have been my first clue that something was up. My family never visited without an agenda. When I opened the door, there stood Megan and Harrison, both wearing the kind of casual but expensive weekend outfits that cost more than most people's formal wear. Megan was clutching a bottle of wine, and Harrison had that practiced smile that he reserved for business meetings and people he wanted something from. "Trevor! We were just in the neighborhood and thought we'd stop by," Megan said, air-kissing my cheek as they walked in without waiting for an invitation. "What a view!" Harrison exclaimed, making a beeline for the wall of windows overlooking the lake. "You really lucked out with this place." I noticed how he said, "lucked out," rather than "earned," but let it slide. "Thanks. What brings you two out this way? You're rarely just in the neighborhood." Megan laughed a little too loudly. "Can't siblings just visit each other? I feel like we don't see enough of you these days." For the next 30 minutes, they wandered around my house with exaggerated compliments that felt rehearsed. Harrison kept mentioning specific features. "This kitchen would be perfect for entertaining," and "the deck space could accommodate quite a gathering." That should have tipped me off to their true purpose. Finally, they settled on the sofa across from me, and Megan poured wine into glasses that Harrison had already retrieved from my cabinet without asking. "So," Harrison said, swirling his wine with the pretentiousness of someone who once took a weekend sommelier course, "business must be good for you." I nodded. The acquisition deal included a consulting contract, so I'm still working with the same team but with better resources. "That's great," Megan said quickly, exchanging a look with Harrison. "We're doing well too, though the economy has everyone adjusting their strategies." Harrison cleared his throat. "Actually, my firm is entering an exciting growth phase. We're courting some significant international investors right now." I later learned this exciting growth phase was actually a desperate attempt to save his failing investment firm, but at the time, I just nodded politely. "That's why we wanted to talk to you," Megan continued, leaning forward. "Harrison is hosting a small gathering for these investors next month, and we were thinking your house would be the perfect venue." Harrison finished for her. "These are people who appreciate fine architecture and discreet luxury. A house like this makes exactly the right statement." I blinked, taking a moment to process what they were asking. "You want to use my house for a business party?" "It would be very exclusive," Megan added quickly. "Just 20 or so really special clients. The kind of people you'd love to meet too." Harrison nodded enthusiastically. "Great networking opportunity for you. Who knows what connections you might make?" The way they presented it, they were doing me a favor by bringing rich people to my home. Never mind that I had built my success without the kind of social climbing they considered essential. "When exactly were you thinking?" I asked, already feeling pressured. 3 weeks from Saturday," Harrison said, as if it was already decided. "We'd handle everything, of course. Catering, staff, all of it. You wouldn't need to worry about a thing." I hesitated, and Megan pounced on my silence. It would mean so much to us, Trevor. This is how family supports each other. Her voice had that subtle guilt-inducing tone our mother had perfected. Remember how we all supported your computer hobby growing up? I almost laughed at the revisionist history. My computer hobby had been actively discouraged, not supported. But challenging her version of the past would only lead to a pointless argument. Against my better judgment, I agreed. All right, but I need to be kept in the loop on all the planning. It's still my home. They both broke into wide smiles that didn't quite reach their eyes. You won't regret this, Harrison said, already pulling out his phone. Let me just send a quick text to get the ball rolling. They left shortly after, claiming another appointment, though the visit had clearly accomplished its purpose. As I walked them to the door, Megan surprised me with a hug. This is why family matters. We support each other when it counts. I stood on my porch watching them walk to their Mercedes, feeling uneasy about the whole interaction. Then, as they reached their car, thinking they were out of earshot, I heard something that stopped me cold. Can't believe that loser actually made something of himself, Megan said with a laugh. Harrison's response was equally cutting. His dumb luck won't last. But we might as well use the house while he has it. Thompson and the Saudi investors will be impressed enough to sign. They drove away, unaware that their voices had carried back to me in the quiet afternoon air. I stood frozen. A familiar feeling washing over me, the same feeling I'd had countless times growing up when I'd overheard my family's true opinions about me. Back inside, I sat on my couch, their wine glasses still on the coffee table, and processed what had just happened. The visit, the excessive compliments, the sudden interest in my life. It was all a setup to use my home for their benefit, while they continued to see me as the family failure who just got lucky. I thought about all the times I'd forgiven similar behavior. The time Megan borrowed my college fund for a semester abroad, promising to pay it back. Harrison, forgetting to include me in the family Christmas despite my gifts for everyone. My parents missing my company launch but flying across the country for Harrison's promotion party. This was just the latest in a lifetime pattern of being used and discarded by the people who were supposed to care about me most. The hurt quickly gave way to anger, then determination. If they wanted to use my success while treating me with contempt, they had severely miscalculated. For once, I wasn't going to be the understanding brother who accepted scraps of family acknowledgement. I began contemplating how to respond to this betrayal in a way that would finally make them understand they couldn't treat me this way anymore. The morning after Megan and Harrison's visit, I started researching what they had told me about Harrison's business growth phase. What I discovered painted a very different picture. Wellington Partners, Harrison's investment firm, had lost several major clients in the past quarter. There were forum discussions about questionable investment strategies and rumors of liquidity problems. This wasn't a company in growth, it was a company on the brink of collapse. Their international investors weren't exciting new business prospects. They were potential lifelines to save a sinking ship. Next, I checked Megan's social media accounts. She had already posted photos from her visit to my house with captions like, "Planning a special event at our lakeside estate next month. #Wellington Legacy. And so blessed to have access to this amazing family property for our upcoming soiree." Our lakeside estate? Family property? I had paid for every square inch of that house with money I earned while they mocked my career choices. The audacity was breathtaking. Over the next few days, my phone became a constant stream of notifications as my family took over planning without consulting me. My mother called to critique my home's decor. "The living room furniture will need to be rearranged, of course," she said without preamble. "And those technology books on your shelves should be replaced with something more impressive. Do you have any leather-bound classics we could display?" I thought this was a small gathering, I replied, already sensing the event was expanding beyond what I'd agreed to. "Well, yes. But the right 20 people require the right setting." Harrison says these investors expect a certain aesthetic. My father called next, suggesting I should make myself useful by acting as a valet for the party. These people will have expensive cars, and it would save us hiring additional staff if you could handle the parking. So not only was I providing the venue, I was expected to be the help. The final straw came when Megan sent me the guest list, a spreadsheet of over 50 names that didn't include my own. I noticed my name isn't on here, I said when I called her. Oh, well, we thought you'd be more comfortable helping behind the scenes, she replied. These are Harrison's business associates, and the conversations will be mostly finance-focused. You'd be bored. It's my house, Megan. Don't be difficult, Trevor. This is important for the family. Bye, family. She clearly meant everyone except me. I was just the provider of the backdrop for their social climbing. As the event date approached, the demands increased. Megan wanted keys to the house for early setup. Harrison sent messages about which rooms would be off-limits to me during the party. My parents suggested I should stay at a hotel that night, to simplify things. Each presumptuous request fueled my growing resentment. I watched as they took over my space and my success while continuing to exclude me from what they considered the family. That's when my plan began to take shape. If they wanted to use my house so badly, they should at least respect what I had built. If they couldn't do that, perhaps they needed a lesson in appreciation. I started small. I found a modest apartment available for immediate short-term lease about 20 minutes from my house. I signed the paperwork and paid the deposit without telling anyone. Next, I began quietly moving my most personal belongings, irreplaceable photos, important documents, sentimental items, to the new apartment. Each trip was carefully timed when I knew my family wouldn't drop by unexpectedly. I contacted my friend Ryan, who happened to be a real estate attorney, for advice on my legal standing. It's your property, he confirmed after I explained the situation. You have no obligation to allow them to use it, especially without your presence. Just make sure you don't damage any of their property if they've already delivered items for the event. I removed anything of significant value from the house, my computer equipment, artwork, and electronics, replacing them with less expensive alternatives where necessary to avoid raising suspicion. I also installed additional security cameras with remote viewing capabilities, ensuring I could document whatever happened from a distance. The smart home system was next. I changed all the passwords and access codes, setting up a special temporary override that would expire on the day of the party. My dog Bruno, a friendly golden retriever who was my loyal companion, would stay with my tech colleague Sam for the weekend. I didn't want him stressed by the confrontation I knew was coming. All the while, I maintained the illusion of cooperation. I answered Megan's texts about caterer access. I approved Harrison's liquor selections. I listened to my mother's increasingly dictatorial decor decisions. I was the perfect accommodating brother, son, and brother-in-law. 1 week before the party, Harrison called with what he clearly thought was a generous offer. We've decided to include you in the receiving line, he said magnanimously. Just for the first half hour or so. Wear your navy suit, not the gray one. The navy photographs better. That's thoughtful of you, I replied, my sarcasm apparently too subtle for him to detect. We're family, he said, and family takes care of each other. 2 days before the party, I made my final preparations. I scheduled a locksmith for Friday afternoon, the day before the event, and confirmed my reservation at a restaurant with a good view of my property for Saturday evening. That night, I lay awake in my bedroom, looking at the ceiling and questioning my decision. Was I going too far? Would this permanently damage my family relationships? But then I remembered Harrison's words, that loser, and dumb luck, and Megan's casual appropriation of my home as our estate. This wasn't just about one party. This was about years of disrespect, dismissal, and conditional love. If my relationship with my family could only exist when I allowed myself to be used and belittled, was it worth preserving? The next morning, I packed my overnight bag and took one last look around the house I had worked so hard to earn. On the kitchen counter, I left a single key, not to my house, but to the apartment I'd rented. Next to it was a note with just an address and 5 words. "You can find me here instead." Then I drove away, my heart pounding with anxiety, but also with the certainty that for once, I was standing up for myself in a way my family couldn't ignore. The morning of the locksmith appointment, I felt strangely calm. I had spent years trying to earn my family's respect through achievement, generosity, and patience. None of it had worked. Perhaps consequences would succeed where accommodation had failed. I met the locksmith, a practical older man named Frank who asked no questions as he changed every lock in the house. I had chosen high-security models that couldn't be easily picked or bumped. "All set," Frank said, handing me the new keys. "Nobody's getting in without these or breaking a window." Breaking windows was certainly a possibility, but my security cameras would document any such desperation. Plus, Harrison and Megan cared far too much about appearances to create that kind of scene in front of their precious investors. After Frank left, I walked through my house one final time, making sure everything was prepared. The refrigerator was empty except for a single bottle of champagne labeled, "For the successful host." The security system was armed and set to alert me of any attempts at entry. The utilities were all functioning. I wasn't cruel enough to cut power or water, but the internet was set to disable precisely when the party was scheduled to begin. I took a moment on my deck, looking out at the peaceful lake view that had drawn me to this property. For too long, I had tied my self-worth to my family's approval. This house represented my success, but their attempt to claim it showed they would never truly acknowledge my achievements as my own. As I drove to my temporary apartment, I thought about the potential fallout. Best case scenario, my family would finally recognize their pattern of using and dismissing me, and we could rebuild on more respectful terms. Worst case, complete family rupture. The reality would likely fall somewhere in between. That evening, my phone predictably exploded with messages as Megan arrived to begin party preparations, only to find her key no longer worked. "There's something wrong with the lock," her first text read. I replied vaguely, "I'm handling some things right now. Can't talk." 10 minutes later, "Trevor, this isn't funny. The caterers will be here in an hour." Then Harrison, "Whatever game you're playing needs to stop now. We have important people coming tomorrow." I silenced my phone and opened my laptop to the security camera feeds. Megan was pacing on my porch, phone to her ear, gesturing dramatically. Harrison arrived 20 minutes later, trying various credit cards and even a screwdriver on the locks before giving up. My parents showed up next, my father examining the locks with the confidence of someone who thinks they understand security systems, but doesn't. My mother sat in their car, doubtless complaining about her ungrateful son. The 4 of them had a heated discussion on my porch, all captured by my doorbell camera. Their expressions ranged from outrage to panic as they realized the magnitude of their predicament. 50 wealthy guests were expected the next evening at a house they could no longer access. Around 9 p.m., Harrison apparently reached his breaking point and called me directly. I let it go to voicemail. "Listen, you ungrateful little shit," his message began promisingly. "We have international investors flying in specifically for this event. If you ruin this for me, I will make sure you regret it for the rest of your life. Call me back immediately." The threats continued with increasing desperation as the night progressed. Megan vacillated between fury and tearful pleas. My mother suggested I was having a mental breakdown. My father simply promised unspecified consequences for my childish behavior. Not one of them acknowledged that perhaps using someone's home while insulting them behind their back was the real childish behavior. I slept surprisingly well that night in my temporary apartment. For the first time in my adult life, I had set a boundary with my family that they couldn't simply ignore or bulldoze. Whatever happened next, I had stood up for myself. The next morning dawned bright and clear, perfect weather for a lakeside party that wasn't going to happen, at least not at my house. I checked the security feeds to find my porch finally empty. They had given up around midnight, presumably to frantically call venues for last-minute alternatives. At 2 p.m., the first disaster struck for them. The catering vans arrived at my house, finding no one to let them in. I watched as they called Megan repeatedly, eventually leaving voice messages about their non-refundable deposit before departing. At 3 p.m., the bartending service arrived with cases of expensive liquor, followed by the flower delivery, the rental furniture truck, and the audio-visual team for the presentation Harrison had planned. Each departure added to the growing catastrophe. By 5 p.m., I made my way to the restaurant I'd chosen, which offered a perfect vantage point of the road leading to my house. I ordered a steak dinner and a good bottle of wine, then settled in to watch the chaos unfold from a comfortable distance. At 6 p.m. sharp, right on schedule, the first luxury cars began to arrive. I recognized several prominent business figures from Seattle emerging in formal attire, confusion crossing their faces as they found no valets, no hosts, and no way to enter the darkened house. Megan and Harrison arrived moments later, both ashen-faced as they realized their backup plan, telling guests there had been a last-minute venue change, had failed. They hadn't been able to reach everyone in time. Through my binoculars, I could see Megan's carefully applied makeup already beginning to streak as she attempted to explain the situation to increasingly impatient guests. Harrison was on his phone, likely trying to secure a restaurant reservation for 20 people on a Saturday night with no notice. My parents arrived next, my mother actually wearing white as if it were her event to host. They quickly joined the damage control effort, but the stream of arriving guests was now constant. As I sipped my wine and cut into my perfectly cooked steak, I felt a complex mix of emotions. There was satisfaction, yes, but also sadness that it had come to this. I had given my family countless opportunities to treat me with basic respect, and they had failed every test. Still, watching the desperate scramble from a distance, I wondered if I had gone too far. These were people I had once loved unconditionally, regardless of how they treated me. Was this revenge making me more like them, willing to hurt others to protect my pride? I pushed the thought away. This wasn't about pride, it was about self-respect. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself and others is to show them there are consequences to treating people as means rather than ends in themselves. By 7 p.m., most guests had departed. Some laughing at the bizarre situation, others visibly annoyed at wasting their evening. I finished my meal, paid the bill, and drove back to my temporary apartment, knowing the real confrontation was yet to come. I arrived at my observation point at 4:30 p.m., early enough to secure the perfect table with a clear view of the road to my house. The restaurant, an upscale steakhouse with large windows overlooking the lake area, was just far enough away to keep me inconspicuous but close enough to witness everything. "Special occasion?" the waitress asked as she brought my menu. "You could say that," I replied. "I'm celebrating a personal breakthrough." By 5:15 p.m., my security app alerted me to increased activity around my property. Through the restaurant's large windows, I could see the first of the service vehicles arriving, a white van with a catering logo emblazoned on the side. I watched as 2 staff members emerged, carrying equipment to my front door. What followed was exactly what I had anticipated. After several minutes of knocking and calling their contact, presumably Megan, they returned to their van, clearly confused and frustrated. My camera feed showed them trying the door repeatedly before making animated phone calls. The bartending service arrived next, 2 professionally dressed people with cases of top-shelf liquor who experienced the same confusion. By 5:45 p.m., there were 4 different service vehicles parked along my driveway, with increasingly agitated staff members conferring with each other about the locked house and unresponsive hosts. At 5:50 p.m., Megan and Harrison's Mercedes screeched into my driveway. Megan was wearing a designer gown that must have cost thousands, her hair and makeup professionally done. Harrison wore a tuxedo that screamed, "Trying too hard," for what was supposed to be an elegant but somewhat casual lakeside gathering. The security footage was priceless. Megan's face transformed from confident hostess to panic-stricken as she realized the service staff couldn't enter. Harrison immediately began making aggressive phone calls, his free hand gesticulating wildly as he paced. "Another glass of wine, sir?" my waitress asked, returning to my table. "Absolutely," I replied, settling in for the show. By 6:15 p.m., my parents had arrived, adding to the growing chaos on my lawn. My mother, predictably, wore a white dress as if trying to upstage a bride at a wedding. My father, red-faced and gesturing at the locked door, appeared to be suggesting some kind of forced entry before Harrison shook his head, likely pointing out the security cameras. The first guest arrived at 6:30 p.m., precisely on time for the invitation. I recognized him as James Thompson, the venture capitalist Harrison had been desperately courting for months. His confused expression as he took in the scene, catering staff sitting dejectedly on their vans, Harrison and my father inspecting windows for possible entry. Megan, nearly in tears, was almost comical. More guests began arriving in quick succession after that. Luxury cars lined my street as confused investors and their spouses, all dressed impeccably, tried to make sense of the bizarre situation. Some laughed it off, while others checked their invitations with frowns, wondering if they had the wrong address. Through my binoculars, I could see Megan attempting to salvage the situation, her smile strained to breaking point as she explained whatever excuse they had concocted. Harrison was moving between influential guests, his body language apologetic but increasingly desperate. By 7 p.m., it was clear the party was a disaster. Guests began leaving after awkward goodbyes, some looking amused, others annoyed at having their evening wasted. The catering manager was having an animated discussion with Harrison about the non-refundable deposit, and two rental company employees were attempting to get signatures for delivery failure charges. My phone had been buzzing constantly. "Megan, I don't know what game you're playing, but you've ruined everything. Call me now." Harrison, "You're dead to this family after this stunt." "Dead? Mom. Trevor dear, we're worried about you. This isn't like you. Are you having some kind of episode?" "Dad, no son of mine would be this irresponsible. Fix this now." I watched as my carefully curated security footage captured Megan's public meltdown. In full view of the remaining guests and service staff, she finally lost her composure. Tears streaming down her face, mascara creating dark rivers on her carefully contoured cheeks. Her $1,000 hairdo came apart as she ran her hands through it in frustration. Harrison wasn't faring much better. I could see him cornered by his business partner Lewis, who was gesturing angrily at the house. Later, I would learn that Harrison had told his investors the lakeside property was his personal residence, a lie that was now painfully exposed. By 8:30 p.m., almost everyone had left. The caterers had packed up their unused food. The bartenders had loaded their unopened bottles back into their van. The rental furniture remained undelivered. All that remained was my family, standing dejectedly on my lawn in their formal wear, their grand plans completely unraveled. I paid my bill, thanked the waitress for the excellent service, and drove slowly past my house on my way back to the apartment. I didn't stop. That confrontation would come later, but I did slow down enough to make eye contact with Harrison as he stood defeated on the sidewalk. The look of pure hatred he gave me confirmed what I already knew: there would be no easy reconciliation. But for the first time in my life, I didn't feel responsible for managing my family's emotions or soothing their disappointment. They had created this situation with their disrespect and manipulation. Now they were experiencing the consequences. Back at my apartment, I reviewed the security footage one more time. saving clips that clearly showed their distress without capturing anything that could embarrass the innocent service staff or guests. These would be my insurance if they tried to spin the story later. Then I turned off my phone, took a long shower, and went to bed. Tomorrow would bring the inevitable confrontation, but tonight, I would sleep soundly knowing I had finally stood up for myself. The morning after the failed party, I woke up feeling strangely peaceful. For years, I had been the family peacekeeper. The one who smoothed things over and accepted less than I deserved to maintain harmony. That role had ended last night, and there was no going back. I checked my security feeds before getting out of bed. My house stood quiet and undisturbed. No one had attempted to break in overnight. Though not for lack of motivation, more likely because Harrison valued his reputation too much to risk an arrest for breaking and entering. My phone showed 47 missed calls and over 100 text messages. I scrolled through them briefly, noting the progression from anger to threats to desperate pleading as the night had worn on. The family group chat had exploded with discussions about my mental health, theories about why I had sabotaged the party, and eventually arguments among themselves about who was to blame for not securing a backup venue. Not once did anyone acknowledge that perhaps they shouldn't have planned an elaborate event at my house while simultaneously insulting me behind my back. I took my time getting ready, had a leisurely breakfast at a nearby cafe, and waited until early afternoon before driving back to my house. I knew my family well enough to predict they would be there, waiting for me. Some confrontations are inevitable, and I preferred to have this one on my terms. Sure enough, as I pulled into my driveway around 2 p.m., I found 3 cars parked outside. Harrison and Megan's Mercedes, my parents' Lexus, and surprisingly, a BMW I recognized as belonging to Louis, Harrison's business partner. I parked, took a deep breath, and walked toward my front door, keys in hand. Before I could reach it, the side gate opened and my family emerged from the backyard. They must have been waiting there for hours, perhaps hoping to catch me returning. "There he is," my father announced unnecessarily, his voice carrying that distinctive tone of disappointed authority he had perfected during my childhood. My mother rushed forward first. "Trevor, darling, we've been so worried. Are you having some kind of breakdown? We can get you help." Her concern might have seemed genuine to an outsider, but I recognized the strategy, framed my actions as mental instability rather than legitimate boundary setting. "I'm perfectly fine," I replied calmly, continuing toward my door. Megan blocked my path, her eyes red from crying or lack of sleep, probably both. "How could you do this to us? Do you have any idea what you've done?" Harrison hung back, his expression cold and calculating. Louis stood awkwardly to the side, clearly uncomfortable being involved in a family dispute but too invested to leave. "I think we should discuss this inside," I said, moving to unlock my door. "Discuss?" Harrison finally spoke, his voice trembling with barely controlled rage. "You humiliated us in front of everyone who matters. Thompson pulled his investment consideration this morning. We're facing potential bankruptcy because of your childish stunt." I paused, key in the lock, and turned to face them. "Childish? Like referring to me as that loser while asking to use my house? Like planning to use my home for your business purposes while deliberately excluding me from the guest list?" A moment of confusion crossed their faces before Megan's expression shifted to guilt. "You heard us?" "Every word," I confirmed, finally opening my door and walking inside. They followed, Harrison still seething, my parents exchanging concerned glances, Louis looking increasingly uncomfortable. Once we were all in my living room, the same room that should have hosted their elaborate party, I decided to lay everything out clearly. "Let me make sure I understand exactly what happened here," I began. "You needed an impressive venue to save Harrison's failing business. Rather than rent an appropriate space, you decided to use my home while continuing to dismiss my success as dumb luck and calling me a loser behind my back. You excluded me from the guest list at my own house and expected me to either disappear or act as unpaid staff. Did I miss anything? That's taken completely out of context. Megan protested weakly. Is it? I pulled out my phone and played the recording I'd captured from my security system. Harrison's voice clearly saying, "His dumb luck won't last," and Megan agreeing that they should use the house while he has it. Lewis's eyebrows shot up at this revelation. Harrison noticed and quickly tried to regain control of the narrative. "This is private family business," he snapped at Lewis. "Perhaps we should discuss this later." Lewis shook his head. "Actually, I think I need to hear this. You told me this was your house, Harrison. You showed me photos of it on your phone claiming you'd purchased it last year." The room fell silent as this new deception came to light. My mother recovered first. "Trevor, regardless of what you think you heard, family supports family. We've always been there for you." "Have you?" I asked quietly. "When have any of you ever supported me without expecting something in return? When have you ever been proud of me without trying to take credit for my success or dismiss it as luck?" "That's not fair," my father interjected. "We paid for your education. The state university you complained about constantly because it wasn't prestigious enough? The one where I worked part-time jobs to cover expenses while Megan got a fully funded ride to her Ivy League choice." Megan flushed. "That's different. I was following the family tradition." "Exactly my point," I said. "The family tradition never included respect for my choices or recognition of my achievements." Harrison, sensing he was losing control of both the situation and his business partner, switched tactics. "We can discuss family grievances later. Right now, we need to address the damage you've caused. I have investors walking away because of last night's disaster." "That sounds like a you problem," I replied, surprising myself with my calm detachment. "Perhaps you shouldn't have built business relationships on lies about property you don't own." Lewis stepped forward. "I think I've heard enough. Harrison, we'll discuss the future of our partnership tomorrow at the office." He turned to me. "Trevor, I apologize for the misunderstanding about your home. It's quite impressive what you've built for yourself." With that, he showed himself out, leaving a stunned silence in his wake. Harrison exploded. "You've destroyed everything. I will sue you for every penny you have. Intentional interference with business relationships, emotional distress." "On what grounds?" I interrupted. "That I chose not to allow people who insult me to use my private property. My lawyer assures me I'm on solid legal ground. But please, by all means, explain to a judge how you lied to investors about owning my house." Harrison fell silent, his legal threats evaporating under scrutiny. My mother tried again. "Trevor, whatever issues you have with us, this was a terrible way to express them. You've potentially ruined Harrison's career." "Harrison ruined his own career by lying," I corrected her. "And all of you damaged our relationship by continuing to treat me with contempt even while trying to use my success for your benefit." "So that's it?" Megan asked, tears forming again. "You're choosing revenge over family?" "I'm choosing self-respect," I replied. "Something I should have done years ago. I'm not interested in revenge, but I won't be used or disrespected anymore. If having a relationship with me requires that basic level of decency, and that's too much to ask, then perhaps we don't have a relationship worth saving." My father, never one to accept losing control, made a final attempt. "You'll regret this attitude, Trevor. Family is all you have in the end." I looked at him steadily. "If this is family, people who use each other, lie to each other, and tear each other down, then perhaps I'm better off building connections with people who actually care about me." For the first time in my life, I saw uncertainty in my father's eyes. The unshakable authority figure of my childhood seemed suddenly diminished. Confronted with the consequences of years of conditional love. "I think you should all leave now," I said quietly. "I have a lot to think about, and I'm sure you do too. They departed in stages, Harrison first, storming out without another word, my parents next, my mother tearful and my father stone-faced, and finally Megan, lingering at the door. Was any of it worth it? She asked. Breaking up the family like this? I considered her question carefully. The family was already broken, Megan. I'm just finally acknowledging it instead of pretending everything is fine while allowing myself to be hurt repeatedly. She nodded slowly, a flicker of understanding crossing her face before she turned and left. Standing alone in my quiet house, I felt an overwhelming sense of liberation. For the first time, I had refused to accept disrespect from the people who should have been my strongest supporters. Whatever came next, reconciliation or permanent estrangement, it would be on more honest terms than ever before. The days following the confrontation passed in a strange, quiet calm. I moved back into my house, reclaiming my space and my peace of mind. My family maintained radio silence, no calls, no texts, no dramatic appearances on my doorstep. The absence of their constant judgment and demands felt both liberating and occasionally disorienting, like removing a heavy backpack I'd grown accustomed to carrying. 3 days after the party fiasco, I received an unexpected email from Lewis, Harrison's business partner. I wanted to apologize again for my role in the uncomfortable situation last weekend. He wrote. I was unaware of the circumstances and would never have participated had I known the truth. On a separate note, I was impressed by the software management system you mentioned developing. My new venture could benefit from similar solutions. If you're open to discussing potential collaboration, I'd welcome the opportunity. It was ironic. Harrison's deception had cost him a business partner but potentially gained me one. I responded positively to Lewis, suggesting coffee the following week. The business news that week brought another development. A small item in the financial section reported that Wellington Partners was undergoing significant restructuring, following the departure of key leadership and the loss of several major clients. Harrison's company was imploding, just as he had feared. Part of me felt a twinge of guilt, but I reminded myself that his business troubles stemmed from his own dishonesty, not my refusal to enable it. I hadn't destroyed his company. I had simply stopped helping him maintain the illusion of success that was keeping it afloat. Megan's normally active social media accounts went conspicuously quiet. No daily outfit posts, no inspirational quotes about family, no carefully staged photos of her perfect life. The silence spoke volumes about how the party disaster had affected her carefully curated public image. As weeks passed, I found myself reflecting on what I truly wanted for my future. The lakeside house, once my dream home, now carried complicated memories. Every room reminded me of the family confrontation, of years of seeking approval I never received. After much consideration, I listed the property for sale. It sold quickly for a substantial profit, which I partly invested and partly used to fund an extended travel break, something I'd always wanted to do but had put off while trying to build a life that would finally impress my family. For 3 months, I explored distant places, met new people, and experienced different cultures. Without the constant background noise of family judgment, I discovered parts of myself I'd never fully explored or expressed. I found joy in simple experiences rather than achievements that could be measured or displayed. When I returned, I purchased a smaller but equally beautiful home, this time chosen solely based on what I wanted, not what would impress others. I also began reconnecting with friends I'd neglected while pursuing success on my family's terms, people who had always accepted me for who I was, not what I could provide them. 6 months after the party incident, I received a text from Megan. Can we talk? We met at a neutral coffee shop. She looked different, less polished, more authentic, with simpler clothes and minimal makeup. Harrison and I are separating, she said after we'd exchanged awkward greetings. His business collapse revealed a lot about our relationship. When the status and money disappeared, there wasn't much left. I'm sorry, I said, and meant it. She shook her head. Don't be. It's been clarifying. Made me think about what I really value. She hesitated. Including how I've treated you. I've been thinking a lot about what you said about respect. It wasn't a full apology, but it was a start. We talked for nearly 2 hours. More honestly than we had in years. There were no magical reconciliations or tearful embraces, but there was the beginning of something more authentic than what we'd had before. My parents took longer. My mother eventually reached out with a carefully worded email that acknowledged my success without quite apologizing for dismissing it. My father, predictably, maintained his distance, though I heard through Megan that he had grudgingly expressed pride in my business acumen, perhaps the closest thing to approval he was capable of offering. As for Harrison, our paths never crossed again. Last I heard, he had moved to another state to rebuild his career, telling a new narrative that conveniently omitted his business failure in Seattle. The most significant change, though, was internal. I stopped measuring my worth by my family's impossible standards and started defining success on my own terms. I launched a mentorship program for young programmers from disadvantaged backgrounds, finding fulfillment in helping others navigate the tech world without the family connections or resources I had lacked. 1 year after changing those locks, I sat on the deck of my new home, watching the sunset with Bruno beside me and reflecting on everything that had changed. The painful confrontation had cost me the fantasy of having a supportive family. But it had given me something more valuable, the freedom to build a life based on authentic connections and personal values rather than others' expectations. The home I truly needed wasn't the house they wanted to use, but the peace I found in being true to myself. Sometimes the locks we need to change are the ones on our hearts, deciding who gets access to our lives and on what terms. And sometimes the family we need isn't the one we're born into, but the one we build through honest connections with people who value us for who we truly are. If you've ever had to set difficult boundaries with family, I'd love to hear your story in the comments below. Was there a moment when you finally stood up for yourself? How did it change your relationships? Don't forget to like this video if it resonated with you, subscribe for more real-life stories, and share with someone who might need encouragement to value themselves. Thank you for listening. And remember, respecting yourself is the foundation of any healthy relationship, even with family.